4.5 years. I was employee number 8. And my business partner, his name's Rob Rogers, he was actually employee number 12, and he was my sales manager. And we grew that from 12 people to 25 people in about 2.5 years. Got to the point where we basically sat back and said, if we can do it in Connecticut, we can do it anywhere. Put together a business plan, went to our old employer and said, got a great idea. You're going to outsource your sales to us. And he did. And initially when we started, we were a lead generation company, very similar to managed sales pros. In fact, I used to tell everybody, you either go with managed sales pros or you go with us. Over the years, the lead gen game changed in our opinion. So we found, what we found about 2.5 years ago is we just wanted to flip the script a little bit. And we really found a need within the MSP community where MSP owners are good at hiring and training, managing technical staff, but they don't really know how to do that with salespeople. And we knew that there was a gap there. So we came up with a service, outsourced sales manager, or sales management as a service, if you will. So really what we focus on now is working with MSPs around the country and North America, really. And we help them from the ground floor up, whether it's in the recruiting phase to help find that right person. Then we have a full-time trainer on staff that gets them up and running as fast as possible. And then they go immediately into our daily management, which includes daily huddles, weekly one-on-ones, weekly sales training, weekly calls with the leadership team. Just like if you had a sales manager on staff, we manage to the numbers, and we found our system to be pretty effective for an MSP that's looking to have a full-time salesperson on staff.
So for those of you who are on the call today that are traction companies, and I know a bunch of you are, John, I see you there. Thanks for joining us today. Tom, always a pleasure to see you. Alan, it's like Las Vegas represent on the webinar today. So thanks for joining us. But if you are fans of the traction process, OSR uses traction strategically to manage their sales team as well. So if you are a traction company, you can transition into the OSR process and pretty much understand all the KPIs, benchmarks, and different language that we're using. I think all of the strategic operating platforms are a little bit different in how they describe things. But, the EOS is the one that both Managed Sales Pros and OSR adopted several years back. And I think that we would both agree, Tim, that it changed our businesses completely. And I know you went self, did you self?
We did. We self-implemented, but we also joined a peer group at the same time. So we kind of we did it in a roundabout way, right? Like we implemented it probably 85%. So we weren't 100% by any means, but we implemented what we knew we needed at the time, and we've stuck to it. We still have L10 meetings every week. And in fact, we're coming up on our quarterly, not next week, but the week after, just because of 4th of July. So it's, it quite literally is the reason that we were able to get the outsourced sales management service off the ground. Rob and I squirreled too much, so this held us accountable for the first time. So it was good.
I am so good at starting things, Tim.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So good at starting things.
Yep.
The execution of things. I mean, I've been putting together our training portal for 7 years now, I think. So I've gone through 3 different LMS systems, and I'm on the 4th one now. So it might be available by fall. It might be available by next fall. But as always, through our education sessions, I'm trying to focus on 3 different phases of development for a business. One, just developing a consistent process. So choosing something to focus on, choosing things to do every day, learning how to track activities and track results. So there'll be some advice for people who are in that phase today. And then phase 2, you're mastering different skill sets, learning best practices, learning the KPIs that you want to measure, learning how to A/B test results, learning how to identify relevant patterns to the role that you're hiring for, automating processes where available. And then in phase 3, we talk about things that are predictable in our businesses. So how do we make data-driven decisions? How do we rely on facts instead of feelings? And then building towards realistic and attainable goals, and learning how to predict your revenue 12 quarters out. So today we'll have some advice for anyone in any phase of those spots. On the call today, and there's we got a fair number of people here today, so that's kind of nice. See that people are interested in adding to their teams right now. I think a year and a half ago we were all terrified about where the pandemic was going to take us, and more of our clients than not saw that they didn't have the revenue loss that they were expecting. In fact, most of our clients grew through the pandemic, and now people are all stumbling through brand new challenges, which is, I don't think hiring sales reps has ever been simple. But it seems to be more challenging for SMB IT firms. And certainly with COVID and the lack of available talent, we're having to compete against, retail and all kinds of, like, for telemarketing anyway, we're competing with retail and people that aren't necessarily the exact same people that the managed services space is going to want to hire. I mean, we hire from prison reentry programs. We hire from drug rehabilitation centers. We hire what I would describe as second chance employees pretty regularly. Most of those employees would not pass the background checks necessary to do any sort of restricted work through managed service providers. So our talent pool and your talent pool, Tim, I know are wildly different.
They are.
So let's talk a little bit about your path for recruiting. How are you identifying these reps? How are you onboarding them? And I want to talk about profiling, because I'm not a huge fan of personality profiling. I think with telemarketing, the only indicator that they're going to be successful is that they have rent due in 2 weeks and you have a job. So
yeah, a little different philosophy there. Yeah. So what we're looking for in a salesperson generally is we've got a few criteria specifically, right? First off, we're looking at longevity. When we're looking at a resume, how many jobs have they had in the last how many jobs have they had in the last 5 years? We don't like to see more than 2. I mean, can it happen? Yeah, it's fine. But you don't want that person who's 12 months at every role for 10 years in a row. Like that shows that they're either not a good salesperson or they're not a good culture fit everywhere they go. And that's an issue, right? So they're kicked to the curb. Ideally looking for somebody who has military background, sports in college, fraternity, sorority, something that shows that, like, really from the beginning, like even entering into the workforce, they were in some sort of team atmosphere where they could play with others. And then from there, it's, looking at, what kind of sales background do they have? B2C, we have historically seen not make a very smooth transition to the MSP space. Generally looking for business to business background in a longer sales cycle. And then from there, we recommend, so our philosophy is, although it can be a little daunting, we actually recommend, or we've kind of adopted a 5-step recruiting process: 2 screening calls internally, 2 on-site meetings or 2 on-site interviews, and then an offer. If it gets to that point, an offer letter would be the 5th. We do after the first on-site interview. That's kind of the culture interview, right? That's when everybody's sitting in the same room. Can this person really work? Can I see this person working at my MSP? If the answer is yes and everybody agrees, then we recommend doing a DISC profile, not to qualify or disqualify somebody, but just to see how they interact with others. Really, what you're looking for is to see, is this person a hunter or a farmer? What we have found with making a 4/5 interview process, a good salesperson who can kind of fake their way through things, they can get through a 2 or 3-step interview process and everything kind of holds together. When you start adding in that 4th step, specifically around the DISC profile, and then a 5th step, which is the offer letter, people tend to get weeded out, and it's all about risk mitigation when you're hiring a sales rep, and that's what we've adopted. We have found the longevity of the sales reps that go through that process. It just flat out tends to be a longer period of time, where the average MSP,
5 interviews.
Yeah. Yeah, look, it can get a lot. It can get, you want to do them quick. You want to, I'm not, we don't want to spread it out over 5 weeks. Ideally, you're doing 3 interviews within, or 5 interviews within about 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. But it's all about, again, it's about risk mitigation and having having similar talk tracks in different interviews to make sure you're hearing the same answer. And for lack of a better term, you're trying to catch people, which sounds bad, but it's the reality.
So one of the things that I want to talk about today is how you hire the appropriate sales talent for where you are in your organization's development. So if you are still the business owner going out on all of the sales appointments and you're looking for someone who's going to set appointments for you. So you're hiring, let's call them a lead generator for lack of a better term, or a sales development rep. You're hiring someone to do top of the funnel work so that you can focus more on closing, writing proposals, nurturing great opportunities, networking. That's going to be a completely different personality profile than somebody who's going to be responsible for full sales cycle engagement. So if you're looking to hire someone that's going to generate all their own leads and close all their own deals, like, one, writing that job description is going to be pretty challenging to begin with, but the odds on someone being an excellent closer and an excellent opener in a small business sales environment are pretty slim. Like, have you seen success hiring roles that go full soup to nuts, or are you more focused on splitting out the roles?
So we have seen success in having people do both roles, but not right away, right? We believe pretty strongly, and look, we take a lot of this foundation, a lot of the systems that we use and the processes from, especially in the prospecting side, are things that date back to even when we were in the MSP space that used to work for us, and we've tweaked them over time, obviously. But I used to be a hybrid salesperson. I was the one making cold calls and doing all the appointments from beginning to end. I would always have, generally, would have a sales engineer with me in case I had to come up against any technical questions from the prospect on the other side of the table. But that didn't happen overnight. What we believe pretty strongly in is having somebody come in and they really are a lead generator in the beginning. And that time can be 6 months. It can be 9 months. It could be, probably shouldn't swear. Sorry. It could be 12 months. It could be 12 months.
Tim, I don't go in for that type of language on my.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It could be 12 months, right? But it's all about that. It's all about that rep developing their skills and having the patience and consistency to make those calls in the prospecting phase, while at the same time learning the company, learning the MSP space, and then slowly transitioning them into more aspects of the sales process. Where we have found failures almost 100% of the time is the MSP owner that hires the salesperson and they're just like, okay, go make calls and close deals from day one. That never works. It just
Here's a laptop. Good luck.
Exactly. Yeah. May have leads, may not. Might use ConnectWise or AutoTask, might not. That's where we see the failures. It's all about nurturing them and almost having them graduate in a way to more areas of the sales process over time, with the end goal of having them take it full cycle. But that, again, that takes time. That takes time.
And I think that you and I are a little bit at odds on the belief that a good sales development agent will eventually be a good field sales rep of some kind, right? Like, yes. I don't know why everybody isn't taking their sales development agents and making them into the best sales development agents in the world, as opposed to hiring a sales development agent with the carrot of, and if you do okay at this, maybe you can have a better job somewhere down the line, right? Like, I want people excited about the job that they're going to be hired for. I don't want them excited about a job they might get 2 years later if they prove to me that they can do this one. If they can do this one, I want them to do this one. I want them to get better at this one. And I want to hire someone else for the other roles. Not everyone's going to have the luxury of the budget necessary to staff for every role in the funnel. right? Like in a perfect world, and if you look at the way that large enterprise businesses or software as a service businesses are building out their sales teams, they're following that predictable revenue model where they've got the handoff point in multiple spots. I also hate that. So, I mean, what are you going to do, right? I don't really like I don't want the prospect to have to explain themselves 4 times.
Yeah.
So I don't really like that chunky, clunky handoff from sales development to inside sales and then to a different person who's going to go in, meet with them, scope out the environment, write out their project quote, right? You can touch a lot of people throughout the sales process for managed services, and you can lose that deal at every handoff. So the more people you throw into the mix, the more likely it is you're going to lose a deal over something ridiculous, like the process taking too long or the process not fitting into what the prospect envisioned at the beginning of it. So laying expectations at the very beginning, not just for your sales team, but so that your clients and prospects understand what's happening in your business becomes pretty important as well. There are 5 things that I wrote about when I was thinking about like all of my clients over the last little while, right? We've had 1,000 MSP clients in the last 7 years, give or take 20. And I'm seeing repeated challenges in the space. And the first one is like what we're talking about right now. And that's like, hey, you're going to come on board as a telemarketer. And, next year we're going to promote you to something else. And then if you're really good at that, we're going to promote you into management. But we're not going to prep you for any of those roles. So hiring the person that's going to do the job as described and who's going to do it non-resentfully and joyfully, that becomes like the first order of business is you've got to hire for the role that you have and not hire people who are, always thinking 6 career moves ahead, right? What if that role doesn't materialize? You're just going to end up retraining that person or like getting rid of them and hiring someone else that's going to be more suitable for the next role. And you can eliminate a lot of that just by thinking about, how are you going to take advantage of the skills that the person that how are you going to take advantage of the skills this person is bringing to the table? Mm-hmm. And how do you map out, like you want to map out career paths for people, but how do you do so in a way that doesn't constantly make people sitting in the chair thinking like, when do I get to stop doing this shitty job and start doing this much better job, right? In their minds, they don't even want the job you're hiring them for.
Yeah, we've seen that, right? We've definitely seen that before. And so look, there's been plenty of times where we've hired salespeople and we did expect to take them into the full sales cycle eventually. And it turns out that they just, they don't necessarily have the ability to do the full sales cycle. And if that's the case, then it kind of goes back to what you were saying and keeping them in that lead gen spot and making it continuing it to be more of a principal-led scenario, but maybe have that person help on proposals, help take the busy work away from the owner or whoever within the MSP. So we've definitely seen that. And I don't, our opinion is when we're trying to find a salesperson for a lot of the clients that we work with, their long-term goal is to have a sustainable sales department, right? So we're all about bringing a salesperson in, whether it's a lead generator, salesperson, hybrid, or outside person, whatever, get them to a point where they're paying for themselves. And then we can sit back and say, okay, this person's paying for themselves. Where do we go next? Do you want to build on the team? Do you want to keep it the way it is and expand it and add another person like that? What direction do you want to go in? And not that we wait until that person to pay for themselves to have that conversation. It's kind of a continuing thing. But again, a lot of the clients that we work with, they're looking to have a sustainable sales team in the future, and we're trying to build that foundation for them. So, I mean, look, I think we can both agree we've had different opinions on the hiring process over the years. I think either one can be effective if you use it.
I'm not even reading their resumes until they show up in my office. Like I don't even care.
A little different from that standpoint.
I don't know how old they are, what their job experience is, but But hiring for telemarketing and hiring for a more senior role, it's a very different experience, right? Half the people applying for telemarketing jobs are just trying to keep their unemployment benefits. So there's no value in reading a resume before they're sitting in front of you, because they're not going to show. You can hand select 800 telemarketing resumes, and of those 800, 8 are going to actually show up to interview. So, that you're dealing with whole new, you guys got to like move up a little bit in the hierarchy for sales.
Yeah, the sales hierarchy. Yeah.
Although I don't know, I've never seen it like that. Like, I personally, if I could make the same amount of money just making calls all day as I do running a telemarketing company, then I would do that. Right? I like telemarketing. I'm not good at nurturing. I'm like a one call. Like, if the opportunity's not there on call one, I'm probably never going to close it, because I'm not going to call them back again. They have to buy today.
Yeah. Look, I can't say I'm a whole lot different, right? But on the flip side, that's one of the reasons I will say, in a very real way, that's why we felt like having the outsourced sales management model could work for the MSP community, because the average MSP owner, they have the same philosophy. But if they're getting leads on a regular basis, right, you know that game, Carrie, in the lead gen. You get them, you get 4 to 6 appointments a month, or whatever that number is. And unless that company is hot to trot, the MSP owner, they don't have time to follow up with it. So why not have a team behind them, or a person behind them, to be able to pick up those ones where they still warrant communication, but the owner doesn't have time to do it. So that's where we find having that salesperson. That's another place that we see a salesperson fitting in, is making sure that opportunities don't fall through the cracks.
Just going back to that sales funnel by a sales task, there's a whole other funnel that happens after you get to the point where you've gotten the opportunity to present. So if you're starting from cold outbound, as opposed to a warm referral being walked in the door, your sales process, the 80% of it is before this presentation, but there's still 20% of the sales process waiting for you afterwards. So you can sit in the best qualified meeting in the world. If they still have a year remaining on their contract with the company that they're with right now, and they're barring any like major disaster that's going to put that provider in breach, most reasonable people aren't going to abandon their contracts until it's time for them to renew them. So what do you do for that year between the day that you met and they're like, yeah, we like it, it's the perfect proposal, we're super interested, but we still have this year remaining? So much can happen between the day that you meet with that prospect and the time that they sign on the dotted line. You could lose that deal 100 different ways, right? Never mind somebody else coming in at the 8th hour to scoop it from you when they sit down with them and present an equally interesting managed services proposal, right? You've got to be top of mind and present through the whole sales process. And if you can't fulfill that like last 20% as the business owner, then you need to start thinking about, are you going to hire a hunter, or are you going to hire someone who's going to be more of an account manager, someone who's going to nurture opportunities, check in regularly? There's a huge personality difference between somebody who has the stress tolerance to call random people and ask them to do something, and then somebody who's just going to follow up on people who are expecting to hear from them and who are cheerful to hear from them, right? Like, it's a big difference in the personality profiling. So depending on what you need, and that's probably the best place to start, is if you look at your current sales setup, what pieces are you missing? What pieces do you love? What pieces do you hate? And how do you fill in the gaps? Right? You may need a $15 an hour telemarketer. You might need an $80,000 a year sales engineer, right? It's a very different profile, a very different way to budget, and you're going to have to plan differently for those roles. But if you said, hey, we're hiring a sales rep, my first question is going to be, what kind?
Yeah.
Like, sales is a pretty nebulous term, especially now when sales and marketing overlap pretty aggressively. Sales reps are expected not just to be good at outbound calling, but they should also be able to craft a decent cadence emails. They should be able to keep their social presence up in a way that is not going to damage or materially, upset anybody online. So how are you planning to hire, and what are they going to do when you sit them down in that chair? I think starting from a job description is always like, what Tracy used to say this to me constantly. You can't just hire every random person you meet on an airplane, Carrie. Right? And I'm terrible for that, right? Like I'll sit next to someone on an airplane. I'm like, I want to work with this person. Come work for us. And Tracy's like, we don't have any jobs right now. I'm like, no, we're going to make one up. It's going to be
it's fine. We'll figure it out.
We're going to hire. Well, but I did try to do that to her once, right? Like I met, he worked for Ericsson at the time. He was a great guy. His name was Todd. And I don't care. We'll find a place for him. And he didn't end up coming to work for us because he had 2 children who both had special needs, and our health insurance plan wasn't good enough to justify leaving where he was to come work with us. But I mean, we're still in touch today. I love that guy.
That's cool.
But he went on to work for Oracle, and he did pretty well there. So I think we would have done fine, Tracy. Thank you. So challenge 2, I talk to a lot of MSP owners who are like super keen on the idea of hiring, like poaching somebody from one of their competitors. And there's a very different experience. Poaching someone, sure, you want to pay a recruiter to go gunning after your best competitor's sales team, go for it. But they've just spent years bad-mouthing you to everybody in the market, right? Like they spent years selling against you. So you want to invite them into your business after them spending 2 or 3 years telling everyone how terrible you are. I guess that's your business. But part of the challenge that you're going to have is you're going to get resumes across your desk that look fantastic from people who are working for your competitors. Mm-hmm. My first question is always going to be, if they're that great, why are they leaving? Right? Yeah. Like, is every competitor in your market an asshole? Probably not. So if there is somebody trying to make a vertical move, my first question is always going to be why.
Yep. So it's funny. We the amount of people that we've talked to over the last couple of years that first call you have with them, kind of explaining our process and how we do things, and they're like, oh well, I just want somebody who has MSP experience. And my first response back every single time is, yeah, you probably don't. Everybody thinks they do, but the reality is, we've been down that road. We've had a couple people that they've come from competitors, and it's not that it never works. It's worked out a couple times, but on average, it doesn't work. And we usually filter it out during the recruiting phase, honestly, because you start to. I mean, one, it's kind of a small community, so you can generally ask around and find somebody who knows somebody and yada yada. But beyond that, there's a reason why they don't work there anymore. So just bear that in mind, right? If you're in the recruiting phase and you find somebody who was at a competitor for 2 years and all of a sudden they're not there, there's probably a reason. Just make sure you look into it in some way, shape, or form, because it's not always going to be as good as you think it is. Let's just put it that way.
And if they're going to walk their book over, right, they're going to walk yours out to the next guy. So that's always a consideration when I'm thinking about, who do I want in my business? What do I want them bringing with them? What are the ethics and standards that I'm going to expect? I know even in Las Vegas, and we've got like 2 Las Vegas MSP owners on the call right now. Mm-hmm. And I know they hang out from time to time. They talk about their client base and the people that work for them. Like, the odds on it not getting back to you that this guy is a dumpster fire. Yeah. I mean, that's probably, you're going to find that out, but you're going to find it out 6 months later than you should have found it out. So, don't be afraid to reach out to your network and find out if anybody knows someone. Yeah. It's certainly worth a phone call. It could save you an enormous amount of headaches in the future.
I can also just a side story, side comment. If you do find somebody that comes from the MSP space and it's a competitor, and you don't know that company, don't be afraid to call them up. Just call them up. Ask who it is. Okay, so 2
big
steps.
Asterisks here. We are not lawyers and we are not HR professionals. So
but I generally, I come from a place where when we have seen it, it tends to be not in the job that they're currently in, but maybe a previous job. So if they're still at that MSP, don't call them up. Let me clarify that. But if they were at an MSP prior to whatever position they're in right now, call up that MSP and find out. I can give you a real life example in Ohio, where we had somebody who 2 positions ago, they interviewed for a company that we have that we're working with in Ohio. 2 positions ago, they worked for an MSP, and this person came in on fire. Right? It was like, oh my God, this guy's great. How can he not? How can he not work? Yeah, he didn't work. We didn't. We made one call, and it was very clear that this person was not a good fit for what we were looking for. So again, just to clarify, don't call up the MSP if the person's still working there. That's not what I meant. I said it a little too fast, but I'm sorry. I was taken from that memory. If it's a previous position and it's not where they're working, call up that MSP and find out.
And just from again, the star there is, this isn't legal advice and this isn't HR advice. Like we run sales management and telemarketing agencies respectively. I know that one of the big differences between Canada and the US, and there's a couple of Canadian MSPs on here as well. In Canada, we don't get sued for giving accurate references. And in the US, you can be.
Yeah.
So there's only one question you can really ask in the US that's going to give you the answer that you want. And that's, would you hire them again for this role?
Exactly.
Right? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. And you can't really pry more aggressively than that. I mean, if you guys are buddies and you're going for beers once a month, like, sure, go ahead and ask about it. But calling a company up and then, or for you as an MSP, providing that reference, you're not really able to legally do so without risking all kinds of repercussions. So I would be very, very delicate in that conversation. But I mean, we all know people. Everyone knows somebody. So use your network to find out whether or not they were successful employees.
Yeah, and that is. So I'm glad you brought that up, right? And that really is the only question that you can and should ask, and that's the only question that we ever ask. But just by the tone, let's just say that in this scenario, just by the tone of the answer, it was extremely clear that this person was not going to be a good fit.
Like an oh hell no.
Yeah. I mean, just not. Yeah. It was a borderline laugh in our face. Yeah, there's no chance that person's ever going to be hired here again. That's basically, and it was like a 30-second call on and off. I was like, okay, thank you. And that was it.
I have a feeling that anybody that I worked for in my 20s would probably say that about me. And I feel like at some point my employee karma has to get back to where it needs to be. Like I've suffered enough, universe, please. But I mean, just because I was a great sales rep didn't mean I wasn't a nightmare employee. Right? I didn't go to work if I didn't feel like going to work. I didn't see why I had to. I already hit my numbers. Right? So if it takes you 8 hours and it only takes me 3, I don't see why I have to work the extra 5.
I couldn't even comprehend trying to manage you. Couldn't there's no way.
Entrepreneurship. Hooray. Well, so that brings me to our next comment, and that's like, you could find the perfect sales rep. Right? We found them. Maybe they worked for a competitor. Maybe they didn't. They're excited to be there. And instead of teaching them about your business, you opt to assume that they're going to be able to develop the sales process that you don't yet have. So this goes back to that slide where are you in your entrepreneur journey right now? Where is your business? Are you at a point where you've got a clearly defined sales process and you need to hire someone and then teach them how to follow it? Or are you not at that point yet? Because if you're looking at hiring a sales rep for your MSP right now, you've never done it before, and you yourself are not a sales-minded individual, you're going to struggle managing a sales rep. If you don't have those pieces in place, it is not yet time to hire, because you're going to hire a sales rep expecting them to build out a process for them to follow. They're going to follow whatever process it is that is easiest for them, not necessarily the process that's going to be best for your business, the process that helps you plan for succession, the process that helps you build an effective sales pipeline. Most of the time, a sales rep will choose the path of least resistance. I don't like to take notes in the CRM. Nobody likes to take notes in the CRM, right? Like that's just a ton of work to me. And when I am knocking it out of the park and someone's bitching at me because I didn't fill in that field properly, like we're going to have problems, right? Like, I'm sorry, could I have closed more business for you this month? What are you so pissed off about? Right? Like that's where you start getting into problems because you allow the sales rep to do whatever they want until they get to a point where maybe they have a bad month. Like if you're loving their performance and you're super excited about what's happening, and then all of a sudden they have a couple of bad months in a row, without process, you have no way to figure out what it is that's causing that. Is it a sales rep? Is it the market? Is it your business? Where are the problems coming from? How are we going to fix them? Without process, you're not going to know any of that. And if you come in and expect the sales rep to develop that process, you're not hiring a sales leader, you're hiring a sales follower, essentially. You are responsible for sales in your organization. They are coming in to help you. So how are you going to demonstrate the role to them? And how are you going to lay effective expectations from day one? What are you finding, Tim, like now that you guys are doing that full time, what's most effective?
Well, I think look, one of the things, just going back to when we were a lead gen company, one of the things that we found often, and I'm sure you did too, you get the MSP that they've had 2, 3, 4 salespeople and none of them ever work. So I just want to write a check to you, and you make calls for me, you give me leads, everything's going to be great. We'll come to find out they didn't really have a sales process. A salesperson started and they basically said, hey, there's your chair, and we use ConnectWise or Autotask. You may have some leads, you may not. Oh, by the way, you need to develop a script and you need to do it all. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but not that much. So, one of the things that we have found, one of the reasons that we made the transition specifically is we saw this need where a lot of MSPs, they don't really know where to start with developing a sales process. And I would say one thing, because we were a lead gen company and because we come from the space and all that, we feel like we've got a process that out of the gate we can really start with and build, kind of develop that with an individual MSP to help their sales team grow. But look, the average MSP, if you're looking to hire a salesperson, things that you need to focus on, you need to have talk tracks for different levels of decision making, whether it's an influencer or C-level executive, scripts, objections. You need to understand the why. Why is this person going to be, why are you different? Why is this person going to be calling and representing your company? And what are they going to be able to say that makes you different than your competitors? When you figured that out, that's a pretty big step. So you find out what makes you different. And in our opinion, the things that make people different is developing stories. Those superhero stories. The time that the server went down, there was I can pull from back when we were in the MSP space. A story that I always used to use was based on response time. During Superstorm Sandy, knocked out power in Connecticut, basically all the whole East Coast. One of our major clients was the Connecticut Science Center at the time. Their servers went down on a Sunday. One of our engineers went over, got them back up and running. Employees showed up Monday morning. They didn't even know what happened. The guy we used to call him the Mad Russian, he sent him an email Monday morning, and he was like, you were down yesterday. Here's what I did. You're up and running. You're fine. That was the superhero story. So find those stories and really educate your salespeople on what makes you different, and have them use those, because that people resonate with stories. They just do.
Well, if you can help them see themselves as the hero of the story, is how we were like, we just did a whole thing with that story brand and our brand archetypes. We're a magician archetype, by the way. Whereas Ian's business, for those of you who haven't been around the channel a while, I got married last week, 2 weekends ago. Anyway, I married an MSP owner. His name is Ian. They're a ruler archetype, right? And the ruler archetype has a very specific look and feel to all the documentation that comes out of the office. All of the sales emails have to speak with that tone now, and the tone for ruler is going to be significantly different than the tone for magician or the tone for sage or the tone for any of the. So if you haven't read anything about brand archetypes, I highly recommend Googling it and checking out there. I think I uploaded a reference. Let me just check. No, I didn't put that one up in here. I'm trying for every webinar that I'm hosting, I'm trying to pop up a couple of pieces of content that I found that were interesting, not necessarily for this particular webinar, but things that I think are worth reading from this particular webinar. I popped up a document that Facebook was circulating throughout the pandemic, talking about business resiliency and different things that you can do that are low cost to improve your stickiness factor with your current and prospective clients. I thought that was a really well-produced piece of content. And then there's a business communication piece from the Harvard Business Review, talking about different types of communication that you should be using with your clients in different situations. So should you be talking to a client differently when you're breaking bad news versus good news? Apparently, yes, you should be. So those are all up in there. If you want the article that I liked on differentiating your brand using archetypes, just send me a quick email after the webinar. I'd be more than happy to send it over to you. But the brand archetype, when you're starting to create those stories, and I know that our marketing agency is the company that created those stories for us. They went and they interviewed our clients. They talked about what they liked about us and why they chose us over someone else. And, you can pay someone to write those stories for you if you're uncomfortable bragging about your accomplishments. But I mean, I'd get real comfortable with bragging real fast if you want to be successful in sales, because most of it is talking about what you're great at and what you love doing and what makes you better. And if you're not comfortable doing those things, you're going to struggle not just with closing business yourself, but in teaching someone else how to close business for you. You've got to be the most excited person in the room when you're talking about your business. You can't really kind of like, oh, well, welcome sales rep. Yeah, we're okay. Thank you for joining us. Right? Like you have to firmly believe, like even in the shittiest of moments, that you are the best business that there has ever been. Yeah. Right? Like, you got some things to fix. We all have some things to fix. And that's a kind of a happy moment in entrepreneurship when you realize that everybody's business sucks.
Yeah.
Everybody's business is the worst. Everybody's business is the best. Right? Yep. Like, if you can't live in that, our business is the best moment when you're trying to recruit, and like, why would somebody come work for you? And like, we're mediocre. Okay, well, career choice wise, that doesn't really resonate with me. So you've got to get really good at being comfortable in talking about your accomplishments, and even just like writing them down somewhere. Like I have a little book where I write down stuff that happened that I was pretty happy about, or that an achievement. I try to do that every day. So when I'm having those days where it feels like the whole world is caving in on me, I can just flip open my look how great I am book. You're right. No, Carrie's the best. I'm awesome. All right. Then I can go back to running my business again. So here's this one. This one was made for me. Volatile leadership. Right. So you're at a position where, in spite of or because of the actions that you have taken, your business has gotten to the point where you can afford to onboard a sales rep. I mean, not everyone ever achieves that moment. So it's a great moment. Pat yourself on the back for it. But one of the things that I had to do as a business owner was recognize that I wasn't necessarily going to like everybody that worked for me. Right? That was a big moment. Like my business coach at the time sat me down and was like, okay, well, how many friends do you have, Carrie? And I'm like, I don't know, like 4. She's like, okay, so you've been alive for 40 years. You have 4 people that you would call in the case of an emergency. And you have, at this time we had like 16, you have 16 employees and 4 friends. What are the odds in you liking all 16 of the people that work for you? I'm like, well, I don't know. And she's like, well, do you have to like them? In my mind, like, yeah, I did, right? Like I wanted to like every person that worked for me. I thought that was important. And then that moment where I recognized, like, okay, I could be a completely different type of person. I don't have to hire people who are like me. I don't have to hire people that see eye to eye with me on everything. I hire people for the skill that I need. I hire people that can do the job that I'm hiring for. I don't necessarily have to buddy around with them on Saturdays.
Well, and I think that was honestly it was a big thing for us too, right? When Rob and I first started at OSR, we used to call it when we were interviewing callers for us. We used to call it the would we get a beer with them feel. Like it would, if it was a Friday or Saturday night, is this somebody that we would feel comfortable just like hanging out with? And we had that philosophy for a little bit, and then we realized that we just couldn't keep on looking at it like that. And probably took us a while, 3 years to really get past that. And then we started to realize, well, okay, not everybody can be like us. In fact, if everybody's like us, we got a big problem. So we started really looking at trying to bring in different personality types that kind of counteract each other within the office, and then transition to using EOS. We had not even close. We were not even close to as strict as what EOS recommends, but we, in a roundabout way, we were starting to put people in the right seats, and then EOS really kind of kicked our ass into gear. Turns out we actually already had a lot of the right people in our company, but we didn't necessarily have them in the right seats. And it just kind of goes back to everything you just said. Like, not everybody's your friend. You need to find different personalities that can counteract others within the office.
But if you haven't got the personality to deal with the day-to-day stress of working with sales reps, and if you've never hired a sales rep, you're in for a treat. We're not all of us easy to manage, right? Like, we understand our value to an organization, which makes us a little more difficult to manage than your average employee that is concerned that maybe they won't be able to find work if they leave this role, right? There is always a job for somebody who isn't afraid of the phone. So yeah. I don't give a F, right? Like, I am not putting up with any BS from anyone, because I'll just go get another job tomorrow. Yeah. There would be people lined up to hire me. At least that's how I feel about it. And that's how most sales reps feel about it as well. So it becomes a very different kind of managerial experience. But if you're at the point where, like, if you haven't been able to hang on to any of your employees at this point and your turnover is high, take a good look in the mirror and see why that might be. Because I know for me, I had to take a step back. I had to put a buffer in between myself and my employees, right? Because I wasn't managing them well day to day. I was very volatile as a leader. If I was having a bad day, everyone knew it. If I was having a good day, everyone knew it. I still wasn't at the point where I was making data-driven decisions. So I was still in my company's developmental infancy, right? I hadn't gotten to the point where I could sit quietly in a meeting and not contribute to it if I didn't particularly like what was going on in it, right? I really wasn't at a place that I would describe as stable, right? As a leader or as a business. And I was bringing more problems into the business because I hadn't solved the biggest problem in the business. And the biggest problem in our business was Carrie, right? Like, I work when I feel like it. I really had to put some pieces into place to make sure that as we onboarded people, that they got what they needed. Because if I was in a great mood, I was the best leader in the world. And if I was in a shitty mood, don't even look at me.
Everybody knew it.
And you've seen it a few times.
Yep. Seen both sides.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I have grown as a business leader, and I mean, there's lots of things that I can attribute that to. I joined EO. And if you haven't heard of the Entrepreneurs Organization, it was a phenomenal place for me to learn how to keep my mouth shut. Right? Like, there was lots of people there that were willing to share with me how they solved problems. And being around a group of people who could say, yeah, I was like that, and here's how it hurt my business. Here's what I did to change, right? So, more therapy later, and more like all kinds of courses and programs, and just trying things, right? Like, I read a million books. How many of those things do you think I actually tried to implement in my business back in the day? Like, I'd read the book and I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. Right now, I look at the book and I try and go through it like 10 pages at a time, and apply whatever I learned in those 10 pages for a couple of days in my business in some way. And then I read the next 10 pages and try and apply a new way of communicating, right? So one of the things that's been working for me is the phrase, help me understand, as opposed to jumping right to, what the hell are you doing? Like, why did you do that? What's like, I told you not to do it that way. Right?
How
Like,
could you be so
help me
stupid?
understand why this happened. We agreed on Monday that we would do it this way. You know, your deliverables were X, Y, and Z. It's Friday. You did it this way. Help me understand why that is. And like that word has saved, like that just one sentence has saved me an extraordinary amount of grief in my business. And then the final one, like money. And Tim, you guys, I think you summarized this like in our quick pre-game the best. And I think your phrase was, if you can't explain it using a napkin, like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
too complicated, right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to think of all the millions of ways that your sales reps could screw you and, you know, get paid on deals and they didn't deserve it, they don't earn it, you're not approaching sales the right way, right?
Yeah.
Your sales rep, if you hire the right one, your sales rep's going to make more money than you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Assuming you're in the infancy stage or the development stage of your business, your sales rep is going to make more than you. So if you're not already paying yourself an industry standard CEO salary and it's going to piss you off to watch somebody make six figures and you're not paying yourself that, maybe it's time to take a step back and look at how you're running your business and think about whether or not, for one, do you need to make more than you're making? And if so, then you need to hold on to that sales role for a while. Don't bring in a sales rep when you're not yet paying yourself industry standard salary, right? It doesn't make sense, right? You can still do this.
Yeah, I mean, look, from a salary standpoint, or from a salary and commission standpoint for a salesperson specifically, we've seen, God, we've seen the gamut, right? The reality is, keep it simple. If you can't keep it simple, if a sales rep can't close a deal, and within about 5 seconds, kind of guess pretty close what their commission is going to be, it's too complicated. Just
like I want to back a napkin math. Like, okay, here's how much money I'm going to make this month, right? Yeah. I want to know that going into it. I don't want to have to figure it out on the back end. And I've got this rolling quarter kicker weird thing that kicks in, but only if I did this. And then if the moon is in Jupiter and it's the solstice, I get an extra 10%. Like, why make it complicated? Make it simple to measure. Make it easy for your sales rep to see how they're going to make money. Make it like, all things being considered, you know, if they have to choose between you and someone else, and your commission package is so complicated as to require an algebra degree, and this other one is like, oh, I get 10% of this. Excellent. I understand that.
And also just keep in mind, as you're developing a comp plan, the more complicated it is for the salesperson, the more complicated it is for you to keep track of that.
Dang.
So, and that's what people don't. We've seen that a few times where a commission structure bleeds into a second spreadsheet. And it's like, if you need a second spreadsheet to figure out what commission is, you're doing it wrong. So, but it's for both the salesperson and the billing person within that company, whether it's the owner, controller, CFO, whoever.
We got to screw up someone's paycheck a couple of times before they start job hunting. Like, I can't stress that enough. I rely on my employer to pay me the amount that we agreed upon. And if I have to constantly go back to them and point out their errors, I begin to feel not only like my value isn't translating to them, right? Like, they don't respect me. They don't respect my time. They don't respect my talent. Like, they're screwing with my life here. And if that commission check is wildly feast and famine, right? If you've got a really long sales cycle and, you know, every couple of quarters, your sales reps get their commission popped up significantly based on a couple of months of rolling average, right? If they miss that by a little bit, there's going to be trouble. Yeah. And if they didn't think that they'd missed it because the calculations are so complicated that they thought that they'd hit their kicker and they haven't, that's when things start to get like challenging between sales leadership and sales reps, right? And if the sales leadership isn't the one that has to calculate out the commissions, now you've got extra steps of complexity where they have to go to somebody who then has to go to someone else. And then there's some broken telephone in the middle. So I think that's a great thing to point out, is that it will save everybody time. But I mean, it will save you time. And I'm all for saving my time at this point.
Everybody else's time.
So I added this slide last minute, Tim, as you know, because I sent you a quick email to say I wanted to talk about it. One of the things that I've been hearing over and over again is, and I heard it on a call this morning, like, well, no one wants to work. No one wants to work. Okay, no one wants to work. I don't think that's true. I
Yeah.
think that as a society, we've all been presented with data that identifies that obviously our jobs are all possible to be done from home in most cases, right? So yeah, there's going to be some pushback of people that have been working at home for a month or for a year and a half who don't want to go back to the office. They like working from home. Maybe they like seeing their kids at 5 o'clock instead of driving for an hour and a half every day. Who could
Yeah.
blame them? Right.
Yeah.
So what are the things that you can do to become a more attractive employer during a high stress period of time where you don't have to commit to something forever? So when I think about solving a problem like a staffing shortage, I don't want to start upping my salary right away, right? Like that's not my first go-to. I don't want to offer a permanent solution to what might be a temporary problem in the market. So one of the things that we've been trying are things like adding on signing bonuses or hiring bonuses or a bonus after completing training, something that's impressive enough that it catches people's attention, but not something that you're going to have to commit to giving them on a permanent basis. So you may not want to raise your base salary to 45 from 38 or whatever it is, right? Like you can't go back on that. And you certainly, if you're not paying the rest of your team that, and that's something that happened to us through the pandemic, right? Like we all of a sudden couldn't get people at $15 an hour anymore. We had to raise that to significantly higher to attract the same talent.
Yeah.
And that meant we had to give everybody that worked for us a raise too, because they weren't going to stick around to find out that their peers were making more than them just because we had to hire them at a time where there weren't as many candidates, right? Are our callers worth $25 an hour and not 15? Some of them are, yeah, but some of them were not. And it's terrible to learn that the hard way.
Well, and that goes back to not for nothing. It kind of ties back to the what you just said as far as hiring people at a higher rate as opposed to people who are already there. It kind of goes back to the commission conversation, and don't mess with money. People talk. Just you've got to have consistency there for sure.
That's why I like the idea of bonuses, like a hiring bonus as opposed to a raised salary. Because if you've already got a functional sales team in place and you're adding to that team, your overhead just went up significantly the minute that those guys have coffee with the new guys.
Yeah.
There's going to be 7 people lined up behind you at your door waiting to talk about the unfairness of your new salary structures. There's also ways that you can compete for talent that won't cost you anything. Like if people want to work from home and it's not going to impact your business to have them work from home, like there are, I mean, if you're super paranoid, I got a demo today of something called active. Oh, now I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's a little big brothery and my tinfoil hat would not allow me to buy it. But the idea behind it is that you can easily monitor what everybody in your business is doing remotely if you want to. Right. But if you don't trust your employee to do what they say that they're doing all day, you probably should active track. Thank you, Howard. Yeah. So somebody showed me a demo of that today on a sales call. And I personally, it creeps me out a significant amount, but I can see how if you were going to add to your team remotely and you wanted to be sure that people were doing what they said they would in the first 90 days, there's lots of ways to do that. So how, like, Tim, you're not convinced?
No, I'll be the first one to admit that pre-COVID, I was that person that you need to be in the office 5 days a week, and the only way, not the only way, but I always felt that people would go at top gear when they were in the office together, and I've learned that that's not true. Since all this craziness started, I moved from Connecticut to upstate New York, and I work out of my house all day, every day. I can tell you I get more done now as opposed to when I was going into the office every day. And we've found that to be true with a lot of salespeople too. Now that doesn't, I personally really like the idea of having a salesperson in the office on a regular basis, but it doesn't necessarily have to be every day, I don't think. You want them ingrained in the culture. You want them, a salesperson in an MSP is already an outcast to a certain extent. So make sure that they're ingrained in the culture and they're talking to the techs and the engineers. But I think gone are the days where you have to have them in the office every day. There can be a remote working. Man, I don't like that Big Brother stuff. Like, yeah, you need accountability, but there's a difference between accountability and micromanaging. And when you start implementing things like that, that's a little micromanaging to me. And I'm not a huge fan of that stuff.
I think we're really focused on, so you can decide who you are as a business. Are you process focused or are you outcome focused? Right? That's the first thing that I would want to know about a business that I was considering working for is, are you in love with your process or are you in love with the outcome? Which one are you expecting me to, like, what do you want me to get excited about? So if you're telling me through your words and your actions that you're excited about process, but it's evident to me that you only care about closing deals, the other stuff gets kind of shuffled to the wayside when I recognize that the owner of the business wants closed deals more than they want anything else. And everything else I can kind of skip or work around or whatever, right? Like I'm going to find the easiest route to success possible. But if the company shows me from the very beginning that they're interested in the process and that I am incentivized to follow the process, I'm not just incentivized on deals, right? Deals count, but they count more if I've followed the process to get there. Because I personally believe that a deal is the byproduct of a process followed correctly. I don't go for the, like, it's not luck that it happened. I followed a sequence of steps to get there. If you can't repeat that sequence of steps and if you can't improve upon it, like just having deals is great until that sales rep walks out the door and then you have no idea how to replicate the success that they had or avoid the failures that you've experienced with that rep because you didn't require them to follow any specific process. So you guys, we are at the top of the hour. I don't have a 12 o'clock. Tim, do you have to run off real quick?
I don't. No.
If anybody has questions they want to ask, we've got a couple extra minutes here. Sorry, we took you right to the top of the hour. If you need to get in touch with me or Tim, hello@managedsalespros.com. We'll get a message to either of us. One thing that we didn't talk about on the webinar yet is the fact that Managed Sales Pros is going to be partnering with OSR to provide fractional sales leadership or sales management as a service to our clients who are interested in potentially hiring their own in-house sales talent and just not managing the day-to-day. So that's a new development for us. I mean, we've partnered on stuff here and there over the course of the last 7 or 8 years, but we always kind of competed head on for the same business. Now that we don't, it's kind of exciting that we get to partner and trade business a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. It's much different being on this side of it, right? Compared to when we were lead gen days, going after basically the same MSPs almost all the time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I still like it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I used to like it. There was nothing wrong with it, but it feels good to be able to. We talked about partnering up in so many ways, and I think we're both at a place where we can partner together and provide a significant value for the space. So I think that's cool. I'm looking forward to it.
Someone just asked, OSR is OSR more along sales management and Managed Sales Pros is still focused on lead gen? So just a little bit of background on what happened with Managed Sales Pros this year. Managed Sales Pros is a business that I started in 2014 in Canada. In 2016, I started a business called Everywhere Managed in the US. It was a Las Vegas-based on-premise call center, and we did all of the fulfillment for Managed Sales Pros clients out of that US-based call center. Our clients wanted US callers, so we figured that out in a fabulous roundabout way.
Yeah.
So I had the opportunity to sell that call center in September of this year, which I did. I partnered with another calling agency. So a woman that worked for me for 5 years started her own call center. Managed Sales Pros is now the sales agency for that call center. We are also acting as a sales agent for OSR. So Managed Sales Pros is going to become more of a training-focused, consulting-focused organization that helps MSPs choose the best vendor partner for them. But I'm not doing I'm not managing any callers anymore. That's all done now out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. best day ever.
Yeah, definitely was. Everyone's like, how come your margins are so high? Like, come run a call center for like 20 minutes and then ask me that question again. I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions, hello@Managed Sales Pros will get those questions over to me, and I can send them to Tim if you need additional responses there. I really appreciate you guys coming and spending some time with us today. I appreciate you spending more than the allotted amount of time as well. So I'll let you get back to your day now. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. Real
Thank
pleasure.
you so much. Yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun.
And I will look forward to seeing everybody on our next webinar, which I believe should be next Tuesday. So thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.